The thing about precision orbital bombardment is that it requires actual precision, and the Hegemony had always prided itself on being thorough rather than accurate. The difference, as Commander Vexthul discovered while reviewing the post-extermination audit, was approximately 7,000 potential lawsuits from the Galactic Ethics Committee. 99.997%, his aide, Sub-Commander Kethmore, announced with the enthusiasm of someone reading grocery lists, well within acceptable parameters for planetary sterilization protocols. Vexthul's mandibles clicked in what passed for contemplation among his species. The bridge of the dreadnought inevitable consequence hummed with the satisfied efficiency of a job nearly completed. Through the viewport, Earth spun lazily, its continents now decorated with the geometric precision of fusion craters and radiation zones. Beautiful work, really. The Hegemony specialized in turning garden worlds into cautionary tales. Nearly completed, he mused aloud. Define acceptable parameters for someone who actually has to file the paperwork, Sub-Commander. Kethmore's feeding tendrils twitched, their species equivalent of a nervous cough. Well, sir, statistically speaking, the margin of error falls within numbers, Kethmore. I don't need a dissertation on probability theory. Approximately 21,000 individual life signs remain unaccounted for. The bridge fell silent, except for the omnipresent hum of life support systems. 21,000. Out of 7 billion. Vexthul had overseen the elimination of entire star systems with better efficiency ratings. Unaccounted for how exactly? He asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Underground installations, sir. Deep mining complexes, military bunkers, research facilities. The preliminary scans indicated most were abandoned or non-operational. We focused bombardment on population centers and surface infrastructure as per standard protocol. Science Officer Kexanala, whose species had evolved from something resembling a particularly judgmental crab, interjected from her station. The humans called it Groundhog Protocol, sir. Their tendency to burrow when threatened. Our xenobiologists classified it as a minor survival adaptation. Hardly worth adjusting bombardment patterns. Minor, Vexthul repeated. He'd been in this business long enough to know that minor survival adaptations had a nasty habit of becoming major inconveniences. Show me the distribution. The main display shifted to a tactical overview of Earth's remaining thermal signatures. Most clustered around what had once been major metropolitan areas, likely emergency shelters that would exhaust their resources within months. A few scattered across remote regions, probably research stations or military outposts running on emergency power. And then there was the anomaly in what their databases indicated as the Australian continent. VVAC-1, he said, pointing. Single thermal signature, but it's been consistent for 72 hours post-bombardment. What's the location? Kexanala manipulated her console. Deep mining complex. Nickel and rare earth extraction. The facility extends approximately 2 kilometers underground, across a network of natural and artificial caverns. Personnel complement? Pre-bombardment scans indicated the facility was operating with a skeleton crew, possibly abandoned due to economic factors. She paused. Current readings suggest a single individual. Kethmore leaned forwards. Sir, if I may, one person represents a statistical irrelevancy. The ecological damage alone will render the planet uninhabitable within months. Natural attrition will handle the remaining survivors. Perhaps, Vexthul mused. Or perhaps we end up explaining to High Command why our thorough extermination left loose ends. He studied the display. What do we know about this particular human? Biometric analysis is inconclusive at this depth, sir. However, the energy patterns suggest someone with technical expertise. They've managed to maintain power generation and life support systems despite surface infrastructure collapse. Resourceful. All humans demonstrate basic problem-solving capabilities, sir. It's hardly remarkable. Vextool had been killing species for 3 decades, and he'd learned to recognize the difference between basic problem-solving and genuine adaptability. The thermal signature showed not just survival, but active system management. This wasn't someone hiding and waiting to die. This was someone who intended to keep living. Recommendations? He asked. Targeted strike, Quegsnell suggested. Single fusion torpedo, minimal resource expenditure. Or, Kethmore countered, we file the completion report and move to our next assignment. The Hegemony has 17 worlds scheduled for processing this quarter. We can't spend days chasing individual survivors. Both had valid points. The practical approach would be to move on. One human on a dying world posed no threat to galactic security. But Vextool had risen through the ranks by being thorough, not practical. Pull up the psychological profiles on this species, he ordered. The display shifted again, showing the accumulated xenopsychological data the Hegemony had gathered during their observation period. Humans, aggressive, territorial, adaptable. Known for persistence hunting, tool use, and an unfortunate tendency toward what their own scientists called irrational optimism. Most interesting was a subsection labeled Revenge Pathology. Fascinating, Kexanale observed. They actually maintain neural pathways dedicated to planning retribution against perceived threats. Most species abandon such behaviors after achieving basic civilization. Not abandon, Vextool corrected, reading further. Systematize. Look at their military history. They've turned revenge into an art form. Kethmore's tendrils fluttered dismissively. Against other humans, sir, what possible threat could a single individual pose to the Hegemony? It was a fair question. The Hegemony controlled 47 star systems and commanded resources that dwarfed the gross domestic product of entire civilizations. One human with access to mining equipment hardly seemed like a credible threat. But something about the steady, purposeful thermal signature bothered Vextool. This wasn't the random heat pattern of someone in survival mode. It was methodical, planned. Sir, Kethmore prompted. Your orders? Vextool studied the display for another long moment. Then he clicked his mandibles in what might have been amusement or unease. File the completion report, he decided. 99.997% is close enough for government work. We'll let natural attrition handle the remainder. And the individual survivor? Mathematically irrelevant, Vextool said, though something in his tone suggested he didn't entirely believe it. What possible difference could one human make? As the inevitable consequence prepared to jump to hyperspace, none of the crew noticed that the thermal signature in the Australian mining complex had begun moving in patterns that looked suspiciously like someone taking inventory. 3 years later, the woman who had once answered to Lieutenant Colonel Torres now called herself Ghost 7, partly because she was the 7th person on her original mining team roster, and partly because she'd developed an appreciation for theatrical irony during her extended underground residency. Morning briefing, Control, she announced to the jury-rigged communication array she'd assembled from mining equipment and salvaged satellite components. The AI that responded had originally managed ore processing schedules. Now it helped plan the systematic dismantling of an interstellar occupation force. Good morning, Ghost 7, the synthetic voice replied with cheerful efficiency. Current surface radiation levels remain elevated but stable. Hegemony patrol schedules indicate a standard reconnaissance flight over Sector 7 Alpha in approximately 4 hours. Perfect. That gives us time to finish the language protocols. Torres Ghost 7 settled into her makeshift command center, surrounded by screens displaying everything from orbital tracking data to xeno-linguistic analysis software. Run the conversation simulation again, but this time use the formal military register we intercepted from their fleet communications. The AI's voice shifted, taking on the clicking, guttural tones of Hegemony standard. Torres responded in kind, her pronunciation improving with each exchange. 3 years of intercepted transmissions had given her an intimate understanding of how the Hegemony spoke when they thought no one was listening. Your accent approximates that of a mid-tier administrative caste, the AI observed, switching back to English. However, your syntax patterns still indicate human cognitive structures. The Hegemony Linguistics Division would likely identify you as non-native within minutes of extended conversation. That's why we're not planning extended conversations, Torres replied, pulling up a schematic of Hegemony personal armor. How's the fabrication project progressing? The exoskeleton framework is complete. However, I must reiterate my concerns about the biological components. Creating a convincing disguise will require tissue samples from actual Hegemony personnel. Torres grinned, an expression that had grown considerably sharper during her subterranean sabbatical. Already handled. Remember that patrol unit that got curious about the thermal vents near Sector 12? Ah, the AI paused. I should have realized. Your demolitions expertise extends to more than just structural engineering. 40 years of blowing things up teaches you a lot about timing. Torres stood and walked to what had once been the mining complex's geological survey station. Now it displayed real-time tracking data for every Hegemony installation on Earth's surface. Speaking of timing, what's the status on our research friends at the northern facility? The display shifted to show a cluster of prefabricated structures near what had been Chicago. Activity patterns suggest a xenoarchaeology team documenting human cultural artifacts. 12 personnel, rotating shifts. They've established what appears to be a comprehensive analysis laboratory. Xenoarchaeology, Torres mused. How thoughtful of them to preserve our legacy while standing on our graves. She traced the facility's perimeter on the screen. Security protocols? Minimal. The Hegemony appears to consider Earth a low-risk assignment. Most personnel rotate through as part of academic research programs, rather than military occupation. Academic researchers, Torres repeated, her tone suggesting she found this information particularly delicious. Even better, academics love to talk about their work. Post 7. I feel compelled to point out that infiltrating a Hegemony research facility represents an exponential increase in risk compared to your previous reconnaissance activities. Everything's risky, Control. The question is whether the risk serves a purpose. Torres pulled up another display, this one showing intercepted communications from across the Hegemony's local fleet. 3 years of listening to their chatter has taught me something interesting. They're not just here to study our ruins. They're here to understand what made us dangerous enough to require extermination. Clarification requested. Think about it. The Hegemony doesn't just randomly sterilize worlds for target practice. They identified humanity as a specific threat to galactic stability, but they've never articulated exactly what that threat was. Torres highlighted several communication threads. Look at these research requests: cultural analysis of human military doctrine, psychological profiles of human leadership structures, behavioral studies of human response to existential threat. The AI processed this for several seconds. You believe they're concerned about human survivors on other worlds. I believe they're terrified that they might have missed more than just me. Torres turned back to the armor fabrication station. The Hegemony spent considerable resources eliminating humanity. That kind of investment suggests we represented a genuine problem for their expansion plans. And you intend to validate their concerns. I intend to exceed their worst-case scenarios. Torres began assembling the disguise components. But first, I need to understand exactly what they learned about us. What made them so afraid that extermination seemed like the reasonable option? The research facility Infiltration serves intelligence-gathering purposes. Among other things, Torres held up a piece of Hegemony communication equipment she'd modified. I've been patient, Control. 3 years of preparation, learning their language, studying their technology. But patience has its limits. You're planning to accelerate the timeline. I'm planning to introduce myself properly. Torres activated the armor's power systems, and the mining complex's lighting dimmed as energy flowed into the disguise apparatus. The Hegemony thinks they eliminated a dangerous species. Time to show them what a dangerous individual looks like. The AI's response carried what might have been electronic concern. Ghost 7. The probability matrices for successful infiltration and extraction remain highly unfavorable. Probably. Torres stepped into the exoskeleton framework and began the integration sequence. But you know what the Hegemony never understood about humans' Control? What? We've never been particularly good at accepting unfavorable odds. The armor systems came online, and Torres's biometric signature shifted as the disguise protocols engaged. Besides, they already killed everyone I cared about. What exactly am I supposed to be afraid of? As the transformation completed, the thermal signature in the Australian mining complex flickered and changed. Where the sensors had once detected a lone human survivor, they now registered something that would pass casual inspection as a low-ranking Hegemony research assistant, assuming anyone bothered to look. Nobody did. The Hegemony research facility buzzed with the kind of industrious energy that academic institutions across the galaxy had perfected. Equal parts genuine discovery and competitive credential building. Dr. Yixandra, lead xenoarchaeologist, was explaining human recreational violence to her research team when their newest specimen walked through the airlock. Fascinating, she was saying, gesturing at a display showing human sporting events. They engaged in ritualized combat for entertainment purposes. No territorial disputes, no resource allocation. Pure recreational aggression. Dr. Yixandra interrupted research assistant Nextool. The specimen has arrived. Ghost 7 shuffled forward with the submissive posture she'd observed in surveillance footage of captured alien species. The Hegemony disguise held perfectly. Her modified exoskeleton registered as authentic Hegemony biotechnology, while her behavioral programming mimicked the documented responses of cooperative research subjects. Excellent. Dr. Yixandra approaching with scientific enthusiasm. Specimen designation? Human survivor designation unclear, Ghost 7 replied in carefully accented Hegemony standard. I was found in the deep places. Found by whom? Asked junior researcher Kexmill, stylus poised over a data tablet. The patrol unit. They said I should come here to help with the understanding. Ghost 7 allowed her voice to carry a tremor of what might have been fear or reverence. I want to help. Dr. Yixandru's research tendrils practically vibrated with excitement. A cooperative specimen? This is unprecedented. Most survivors from sterilized worlds exhibit extreme hostility toward Hegemony personnel. I am not hostile. Ghost 7 said, which was technically true. Hostility implied emotion. What she felt was considerably more systematic. I want to learn. To understand why it happened. Subject demonstrates advanced linguistic capabilities, Kexmeal noted. Hegemony standard with minimal accent deviation. How did you acquire this knowledge? I listened. In the deep places there were communication devices. I learned your words. Ghost 7 gestured vaguely. I thought if I understood, maybe I could... Could what? Dr. Yxandra leaned forward. Could become acceptable. The phrase hung in the air with perfect, calculated pathos. Could prove that not all humans were dangerous. The research team exchanged glances. This was exactly the kind of psychological profile they'd theorized about in their reports. A survivor exhibiting classic adaptation behaviors, seeking integration with the dominant species. Tell me about your people, Dr. Yxandra said gently. What made them dangerous? Ghost 7 tilted her head, as if considering the question carefully. We never stopped. Even when stopping would have been logical. Elaborate. When something hurt us, we remembered. When something threatened us, we prepared. When something defeated us, she paused, we adapted. Junior researcher Thex Arnold looked up from his calculations. The psychological profiles indicated humans possessed exceptional pattern recognition abilities. Is this accurate? We saw patterns everywhere, Ghost 7 confirmed. In your ship movements, in your communication protocols, in your research methodologies. She gestured around the facilities. Even now I can see the patterns in how you study us. Dr. Yxandra's excitement was palpable. You're observing our research methods? What patterns do you identify? You want to understand our violence, but you study our games. You want to understand our persistence, but you examine our failures. You want to understand our adaptation, but you only speak to the survivors who surrendered. The room fell silent. Kexmeal's stylus stopped moving. What do you mean? Dr. Yxandra asked carefully. The humans who survived by hiding, by running, by surrendering. We are not representative of the species that concerned you enough to require elimination. Ghost 7's voice remained steady, educational. We are the humans who failed to be dangerous. Then what would a dangerous human look like? Thexanu asked. Ghost 7 appeared to consider this. A dangerous human would not surrender, would not hide, would not seek integration with the species that destroyed their world. She met each researcher's gaze in turn. A dangerous human would study you as thoroughly as you study them, would learn your language, your technology, your weaknesses, would wait patiently for the optimal moment to demonstrate that your extermination was incomplete. The research team realized several things simultaneously. First, that their specimen was speaking in the present tense. Second, that she had somehow acquired detailed knowledge of their research protocols, despite claiming to have lived underground for 3 years. Third, that the biometric scanners were showing readings that didn't quite match baseline hegemony physiology. Alert security, Dr. Yxandra whispered to Kexaman. Security protocols are already engaged, Ghost 7 said conversationally. I activated them when I entered the facility. Standard lockdown procedures. No one in, no one out. No communications beyond this facility until the all-clear signal. That's impossible, Thexenol protested. Those systems require command authorization codes. Yes, Go7 agreed. I particularly appreciated the irony of using your own security protocols against you. It seemed appropriate. Dr. Yxandra backed toward the emergency communication panel. What do you want? Information, Ghost 7 replied. specifically the location of your sector command vessel. I believe it's called the Doctrine of Necessity. Where would you need that information? Ghost 7's expression shifted subtly, and for the first time, the research team saw something that their psychological profiles had warned them about. The look of a human who had stopped pretending to be harmless. Because, she said, I have a message to deliver to the Hegemony leadership about the effectiveness of their extermination protocols. And what message is that? Dr. Yxandra asked, though she suspected she already knew. And sometimes 99.997% isn't quite good enough. The facility's lights flickered as Ghost 7's modifications to the power systems engaged. Outside, the research team's transportation back to orbit began experiencing what would later be classified as systematic mechanical failures. Now then, Ghost 7 continued pleasantly, shall we discuss command vessel access codes, or would you prefer to continue your research into human persistence behaviors through direct observation? Admiral Quextharan had commanded the Doctrine of Necessity for 12 years without losing a single engagement, which made the proximity alerts currently screaming across his bridge particularly insulting. According to his sensors, something was systematically destroying every Hegemony installation in the Sol system, and doing it with their own equipment. Status report, he demanded, though the tactical display already told him everything he needed to know. 7 research facilities, offline. 3 mining operations, obliterated. The orbital monitoring station, currently broadcasting Hegemony surrender codes on all frequencies. Admiral, his communications officer announced, we're receiving a transmission from the source of the interference. Put it through. The main screen flickered, revealing a figure in salvaged Hegemony armor, standing in what appeared to be the Doctrine of Necessity's own shuttle bay. Admiral Quextharan experienced the peculiar sensation of looking at his ship's interior from the outside. Greetings, Admiral, the figure said in flawless Hegemony military formal. I believe you've been looking for me. Identify yourself. I am the statistical remainder from your Earth operation. The acceptable loss margin, the rounding error. She removed her helmet, revealing features that Quextharan's xenobiology briefings had taught him to recognize as human. I am the 0.003% you decided wasn't worth the extra ammunition. The bridge crew turned to stare at their admiral. Quextharan felt the weight of their attention like a physical force. Impossible, he said. Our sensors would have detected a boarding attempt. Your sensors did detect it, the human replied. Approximately 6 hours ago, when a routine supply shuttle requested docking clearance, your automated systems verified the authorization codes, processed the cargo manifest and granted access to Bay 7. She gestured around herself. Standard procedure, flawlessly executed. Those codes are encrypted with quantum-level security. Yes, and I'm sure your research teams would have been fascinated to learn how I acquired them. Unfortunately, they're not available for comment at the moment. Communications Officer Nexful looked up from his station. Admiral, all surface installations have gone silent. We're detecting massive structural damage consistent with controlled demolitions. The human continued. I want to thank you for the comprehensive surveillance data your installations collected. 3 years of observing my thermal signature taught me everything I needed to know about your detection capabilities. And your research into human psychology, extremely helpful for understanding exactly how to maximize the impact of my message. What message? Quextharan demanded. To the one I'm about to broadcast to every Hegemony frequency in this sector. The human activated a device that looked suspiciously like modified Hegemony communication equipment. Attention, Hegemony forces. This is Lieutenant Colonel Torres, sole surviving representative of the human species. I am hereby declaring war on behalf of 7 billion dead. You're one individual against an interstellar empire, Extinction said. This is madness. This is mathematics, Torres corrected. Your own projections indicated that humanity posed a significant threat to galactic stability. You committed substantial resources to our elimination because you calculated that leaving us alive represented an unacceptable risk to your expansion. She smiled, and Extinction finally understood why his predecessors had found humans so unsettling. I'm here to validate your projections. Security to Shuttle Bay 7, Extinction ordered. Security is currently experiencing technical difficulties, Torres replied, as is life support, main engineering, and your navigation systems. I've had several hours to become acquainted with your ship's infrastructure. The bridge lights flickered ominously. What do you want? He asked. What I want is for 7 billion people to still be alive, Torres said. Since that's not available, I'll settle for ensuring that your extermination campaign becomes the most expensive mistake in Hegemony history. She held up a data crystal. This contains complete documentation of your Earth operation, including the extermination orders, casualty projections, and post-operation reports. I'm transmitting copies to the Zephyrine Alliance, the Cordial Syndicate, and approximately 17 other political entities who would be very interested to learn about the Hegemony's approach to preemptive species elimination. You're starting a war, Extinction realized. I'm finishing one, Torres corrected. The war you started when you decided that potential future threats justified present genocide. She paused. The difference is that I'm fighting it the way humans fight wars, not against armies or governments, but against the ideas that make armies and governments possible. Meaning that every species in this sector is about to learn what the Hegemony considers acceptable losses when dealing with potential threats. How long do you think your alliance structures will survive once your member worlds realize they're just statistical calculations in your expansion algorithm? The communication channels erupted with incoming transmissions from across the sector. Extinction could see the political implications cascading through the Hegemony's carefully maintained diplomatic networks. You're destroying the stability of this entire region, he accused. I'm revealing that the stability was an illusion based on ignorance, Torres replied. Consider it a public service announcement. Even if you succeed in undermining Hegemony authority, what have you accomplished? You're still alone. Your species is still extinct. Torres was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried something that might have been sadness, if humans experienced sadness the way other species understood it. Admiral, your psychological profiles were incomplete. You studied human persistence, human adaptability, human violence, but you missed the most important characteristic. She looked directly into the camera. Humans don't fight for victory. We fight so that the things we care about survive us. The doctrine of necessity shuddered as Torres' modifications to the ship's systems reached their logical conclusion. Emergency lighting bathed the bridge in red. The galaxy is about to learn that the Hegemony isn't an inevitable force of galactic order, Torres continued. You're just another empire that makes convenient moral compromises, and empires built on convenient compromises have a tendency to discover that their subjects find their own compromises more convenient than continued loyalty. You're going to die here, Extinction said. Probably, Torres agreed. That was always part of the calculation. But I'm taking your command structure with me, along with your operational security, your political credibility, and your comfortable assumption that extinct species can't file complaints. The ship's hull began to vibrate as Torres' final modifications engaged. "Goodbye, Admiral," she said. "Please give my regards to whoever ends up explaining this to Hegemony High Command." The transmission ended, just as Admiral Quextaran realized that the human had turned his own ship into the galaxy's most effective testimony about what happens when you try to achieve 100% completion on a genocide project, but settle for 99.997. Somewhere in the expanding debris field, Torres's final message propagated across subspace frequencies, carrying with it the complete documentation of humanity's extermination, and a simple observation that the Hegemony's definition of acceptable losses apparently included their own command structure when those losses proved inconvenient enough. The galaxy, as it turned out, found this information very educational indeed.